Be intentional. Take action now. Welcome to the Humanscape podcast, where we help business leaders develop the cultural landscape for tomorrow's success. In a world that is wobbly, we're here to help you create a strong cultural foundation for your business. And it's all about bringing your values to life, elevating people to perform at their best, creating a strong strategic plan, and offering lifelong learning opportunities. Are you ready to bring work to life and life to work? We are. Let's talk. We're back with another episode of Humanscape podcast from HumanWorks 8. In a world that's constantly changing, it's essential for business leaders to understand how to bring work to life in their organizations and life to work for their people. I'm Sean Gaulius, the Thought Catalyst with HumanWorks 8, and I'll be your host for today's conversation. I'm excited to be co-hosting with Sarah Marshall by my side from our team. In just a few minutes, you'll hear from today's guests, Kristin Ferge and Gia Mattioli-Tolfa from Capri Communities. We're really looking forward to today's conversation. We're going to explore how organizations are bringing their values into hiring and onboarding, what it means to truly invest in employee growth, and how leaders can stay grounded even when retention is tough. What makes this conversation especially meaningful to me is that I'm currently the primary caregiver for a loved one in the senior living space, which happens to be a world both of our guests know so well. So while today's topics are rooted in leadership and workplace culture, this one's also kind of personal. So with that, Sarah, a little bit about Kristin and Gia and Capri Communities.
Capri Communities is a senior living company with locations throughout Southeast Wisconsin, committed to their Enjoy Life tagline as they serve over 3,600 residents. Kristin currently serves as president and CFO at Capri. Her holistic understanding of operations and sustainable growth has directly contributed to Capri's growth during her tenure. Kristin has been instrumental in positioning Capri as being recognized as one of the best operators in Wisconsin and creating the platform for continued growth and operational success. To enjoy life, Kristin loves to travel, read, play tennis and pickleball or Pilates, and spend time with family and friends. As Senior VP of Human Resources, Gia and her team champion Capri's people and culture initiatives, including succession planning, learning and talent development, diversity and inclusion, workforce planning, and total rewards. To enjoy life, Gia enjoys traveling, camping, and spending time with her family and friends.
All right, so let's dive in. Well, welcome, Kristin. Welcome, Gia. Thanks for joining us today on Humanscape. Hearing those bios, it's clear that each of you have a unique way of embracing life. And that brings us to a phrase that seems to resonate deeply at Capri: enjoy life. It's more than just a tagline because it seems to be a guiding principle. And I'd love you to share more about this enjoy life. What does it mean for the Capri culture? And why is it really central to your work and your people?
Enjoy life to Capri means, finding activities, causes, purpose that makes one happy and fulfilled at any age. As we age, sometimes we are unable to participate or do the things we used to. And it's critical that we don't stop having fun. We want to continue to learn. We want to continue to try new things. So as individuals, we need to pivot and we need to find those new opportunities that we enjoy so that we can maximize our life experiences. It's really the foundation of everything that we do within Capri and within our employees is to help our residents find those opportunities.
I love that today's conversation is really about life. Capri is all about enjoying life, telling you to enjoy life, and we're saying yes, and also bring it to work.
And find the fun. I'm going to highlight that right from the beginning because that jumped out at me, Kristin, what you're saying, because I think sometimes that's missed in a culture in a workplace. And we think that's so important that you have to have those fun moments at the same time.
It's what brings people back each day.
Yeah. So let's move into the 3 parts of the mind segment. We like to do this with our guests to learn a little bit about you And we do that through a philosophy and a framework we use a lot to think well about people. And that's looking at them through all three parts of their mind: their cognitive intelligence, their personality, which is sometimes called the affect or affective part of the brain, and then their conative instincts. So let's start with the cognitive. Kristin, what's something that you have to be smart about at Capri in order to succeed as a caregiver there?
I think you need to have empathy to be able to read people and be able to meet them where they're at on each specific day. As we age, our residents are going to have good and bad days. And I think our great caregivers understand that and are able to kind of address what their concerns and needs are for that day.
I love that. We do a lot of work with organizations around empathy. And we said it really sets up with, you have to really know people better and have to have a curiosity about people and have to not talk at people, but just listen well about people. So we do a lot of training and work around that. Is there anything you do that really helps increase what does empathy mean, or how do people really bring that to life? Gia, anything that comes to mind?
From an empathy standpoint, I feel like what we do is we train them with their skills and their abilities, but the empathy comes in with understanding how what they do impacts not only their team members, the residents, but the residents' families as well. And I think that's very impactful for the success of a caregiver. You're kind of feeling what you give, you're getting back. And I think that's not easy, but we have a care staff that does that very well, and it's important to them.
And I love how you tied empathy into the cognitive, because that's all about an understanding that you really have to learn.
Let's talk a little bit about personality, that affective part of the mind. Gia, I want to ask you, what personal core value of yours aligns most closely with the values at Capri Communities?
I think my core value that I feel gets met every day with Capri is compassion. When we have something that we're working on, developing a program or developing another project for residents to work with or solving complex situations, it's always led by decisions that can or will impact like the residents, the families, and the employees. So when we're solving problems, we're always thinking compassionately on our side, what is the outcome? How do we do that in a constructive way so that everybody feels like they're being understood and their thoughts and their processes are being considered? And for me, I love that piece about Capri. It's always about how do we do right by everybody involved? And that's really important for me personally.
And I think, Gia, that the compassion from that affective personality side leads to that empathy practice and skill building on that cognitive side. I like that you pulled that together.
And I know from my experience, both of those things are really important. And the best people that I interact with have that understanding, that empathy, but they care. That's the bottom line, that they care. And they want to be there to care about people. And that's what I'm feeling from you, Gia. And that's so important. The third part of the mind, we offered up to both of you to sort of look at this new conative instincts part of the brain. And I thank you both for playing along with us and taking our Colby A assessment. And my question to both of you after sort of hearing that, and we'll talk more about that outside of this conversation. So if I start with you, Kristin, if you think about your natural way of taking action, you've got the empathy, you've got the care. When you're in the flow, where do you jump in? What's your natural way of jumping in, solving problems, doing the work?
I like to fact gather, and I kind of like to understand all of the options before I take action. I tend to be an analyzer, so I kind of like to understand, the pros and cons. But I will also say that I'm a pretty quick decision maker. So I think I have the ability to process information quickly and use my prior experiences to draw from. And then once I make a decision, I'm decisive.
Kristin, I think you already know your conative instincts. That is you. If I looked at your result, I would say that's Kristin in a nutshell. And Gia, what gets you in the flow? When you're in the zone, what are you doing that's your way?
So first, I do appreciate the decisiveness of Kristin. It's awesome. kind of like Kristin, just based on my, I've done this a long time, so I have a lot of experience, but I'm a data and an outcome kind of researcher. For me, I want to make sure that the decisions and the changes being made meet the needs of not only the business, but the people being impacted. So I probably am not as quick to make a decision, but when I do, I'm pretty decisive and I want to move forward. But I'm also very outcome driven. So I like to play all the scenarios to make sure and be prepared for what that next step could be, whether it's changing it because it didn't work or supporting it if it meets the needs of the group.
I love that, Gia. I want both of you caring for my mom, because I want people that are smart and get the details, that have a good process and can make some quick decisions that impact people really, really well. And that's what you were both just saying. The work you do is so important, and it centers on people's well-being, both your residents and your team members that way. And we feel at Human Works 8, at the heart of that is what one of our core universal beliefs is: everyone connects, and that idea about connection. And I think it's a belief that we think is foundational. In great cultures, connection has to be there, and it has to be intentionally built and ongoing and growing that way. So whether it's between staff and residents and team members themselves, it's what everything is built on. So Kristin, as we think around everyone connects from a Capri belief and a Capri way of looking at it, what are some intentional practices you use with your team or between team and staff and residents that helps with that connection at your communities?
One of the things we use is what we call our CARES cards, and that's used by staff, residents, their family members to recognize each other. They're cards that are available at the communities as well as online, and you can give somebody a CARES card who you see distributing one of our values. And CARES basically stands for they're committed to the resident experience, they're attentive to individual needs, respectful to all, engaged in our local community, and they serve with integrity. And so we share these care cards a lot of times within the communities. They're brought up to the home office as a way to kind of recognize individuals who are living out our values.
That's such a great recognition practice. I really like that. And that's important from the start. I want to talk a little bit about that. Gia, when we first met, you shared some cool insights about Capri's onboarding process. And you mentioned that big binder that every employee gets and how you set aside that first full week for training. So it's clear that this time is really about ensuring new hires are aligned with Capri's mission and values. With such an intentional onboarding process, Gia, how do you ensure that new employees carry that sense of values alignment with them as they start to settle into their new roles?
So like we had talked about, we have a fairly structured onboarding, process for, depending on the size of the community. Some of the communities are much smaller and some are very large. So some may be a 3-day, some may be a 5-day orientation program. And to your point, the mission and the value of Capri and how we work as a team is kind of integrated into all of the orientation pieces. So how you're communicating today and how that impacts people tomorrow and the residents. And like we had talked about, clearly communicating with individuals. For us and the staff, when you're going through that significant onboarding process, the staff can kind of tell early by their interest in the onboarding program and the questions that they're asking to get clarification and understanding, what is the expectation of me working in this type of building or with this group. And often we have the ability to kind of see that early on. And sometimes you may get moved into an area where you're working in a much lower acuity level because your skill set is a little newer, or we have people that are interested immediately in working in a memory care community, which we know requires a lot of skills, empathy, communication, understanding the criticalness of our mission and our values. And another step that we offer them early on, which helps engage them in being part of the team, is they can often become medication certified during the process. So they can already step into a very value added position as they come into the community. And for us, that's often very telling about their engagement with the staff. But it's often that feedback of questions, asking for clarification around even just understanding what Capri is about. And those days offer a really hands-on opportunity for the staff and the new hires to talk through not only expectations, but their questions or their concerns about things they may have not done yet or understood. So it's really that communication piece, and just that then you have people that you've worked with that kind of become your, I don't want to say direct mentor, but somebody that has that experience that you can go to and ask those questions. So a lot of it is about training and understanding our programs, but also developing that partnership right off the bat with people who that you can go to for help.
It sounds like in that you really get a good feel whether a team member that you're bringing on is a fit or not a fit right away, or where you just need to coach or direct or redirect, and then also do a training plan. I know in my experience working with aides in a senior living, I always say, hey, they must practice patience. It takes a ton of patience. I don't know about both of you, but that's just one that, even being an ambassador for a resident, patience. And then sometimes, I don't know about you, I just say, I just need to take a breath, pause, and just take a breath. Is what I have to do. You never know what's happening. And I hear that you give them a lot of sort of hands-on time to sort of think through and learn about what's needed there. Would you agree with some of those, Gia, that those are kind of important things?
I absolutely would. Also, I think part of when you're learning through this program too, is knowing when you should probably ask, or if you're unsure, like who to go to when you're like, I'm not quite sure. And just having that feel of partnership is also very important, especially going into residence rooms and families of people that you don't know at all in some cases. So yeah, sometimes it's taking that pause, like you said, and thinking, maybe I should ask somebody for help or direction.
It sounds like, we were talking about the cognitive instincts. I would say somewhere somebody has to learn about that risk and uncertainty. When you're working in a senior living, there's always a little bit of risk and uncertainty, at times, and they have to find their way of sort of really getting through that. Would you agree?
I would agree. We have clinical nursing staff that can help support the caregiving staff too when they're not quite sure. So you don't want them to feel like I have to do this on my own, but giving them the tools and the opportunity with people to ask questions.
You heard us talk about the cognitive part of the mind in today's 3 parts of the mind segment earlier in this episode. The only way to measure the cognitive part of one's mind is by taking the Kolbe-A index. The Kolbe-A isn't about personality or intelligence. It's about you in the zone, you adding your best value, you at your most creative, how you get things done when you're free to be yourself. At HumanWorks 8, we use the Kolbe-A as the foundation to our talent optimization work with clients to help individuals and teams get the right people in the right role, build confidence, strengthen relationships, and improve performance. Want to know your unique result? Take the Kolbe-A index and uncover how your mind naturally works for your best performance. Visit humanworks8.com/Kolbe, Kolbe, to learn more.
It sounds like I would learn in that onboarding around questioning, and it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay not to know everything because there's so much as far as it goes, and you work together as a team for that growth and learning. And I know, Sarah, you do a lot of onboarding. That's one of a sweet spot for you that you have a lot of passion about. For some of the other clients, what would you add to what Gia said? A lot of our clients don't have a binder or and we really almost help guide them more that way to develop something so a little bit more intense. Anything you would add to what Gia said around that?
Yeah, and Gia, I love a good binder. I would love to see it, and that just sounds wonderful to me. I think, Shawn, the Capri team has some really great strategies in terms of onboarding. One thing that I like to call out with onboarding, and Gia, it sounds like you're doing this already, using that values language as much as you can, both written and verbal, even if it's like a templated email in your HRIS system that gets pushed out, but just the repetition of those values words is so important. I also think connection is a piece. A focus on belonging is really going to strengthen the connection to others and to the organization right from the start. So just thinking about how can you show every new hire that they matter, that they're important. And then the third thing I would add is just showing that long-term plan. So for many individuals, especially those who, from a conative lens, initiate and fact finder and follow through, understanding the detail of that role and seeing how everything fits into the greater plan, even having that checklist to really show them how can you be successful in that more immediate 30, 60, 90-day period. Those are, I think, three things, Shawn, I would just call out about onboarding. And Capri, you're already doing some of those great things, which I love.
I talked about risk and uncertainty. You brought up fact finding, and we learned that both Gia and Kristin have a strength in that area. And I bet they look for people that have strengths in those areas too, because there's a lot of information. And we always say that's the best way. And Gia and Kristin, I would love to get your thoughts on this. When you're trying to find a right fit candidate, if you had to profile, as you go through the interview process or bring on somebody in that hiring, and I know right in this day and age, hiring and talent, it can be a struggle to find the right fit people. If you think around right now, are there certain characteristics that you would highlight saying, we know if we learn through the onboarding or even before onboarding and the hiring process, what would be some of those right fit characteristics or needs for a role in your community?
The role depends, right? If we're hiring an executive director or an RN, we might be looking for different leadership qualities. Caregivers, I think we look for somebody who does exhibit empathy. I'll be honest, we also need people who are dependable. We have people taking care of people. We need to be able to depend and know that they're going to show up for their shift and on time. I also think there has to be an element where they can pivot. As you mentioned, and I would concur, we never quite know what the day is going to have or unfold at a community because every day is different. And you can come to work thinking you're going to do X, and that may change because of some, resident's need or something changes or a family shows up unexpectedly. And I think you have to be able to handle pivoting with stride and not let it overwhelm you.
I think that's great. And it sounds like there's a way to even reward people that pivot well through your care cards and things that way, saying, hey, you got us through this moment, this week, this day, which is so important. And are there other ways that you'd like to recognize or really call out, or how do you support just making people know that, okay, what I did today had impact? Is there anything else outside the care cards, that a way that you sort of let people know this is it? You had a strong day and we see it.
Sort of celebrating that dependability.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of, I would say, financial recognition type bonuses that are awarded. We also do share, resident letters or any kind of community level wins with the employees so that they can understand and feel the impact that they had. But then we also once a year have what we call our Jimmy celebration, which is where, there's certain criteria, but there's probably 30 different positions, including caregivers. And we are looking at, third shift in memory care, where we bring them all to a hotel and have a nice lunch, and there's a banquet and they're recognized. And to kind of make the list or the cut, you have to get nominated by somebody in your community who will nominate and write basically a letter of why they think you should be considered for the caregiver of the year. And that's very public. That's all over social media. They get a plaque. So we do try to recognize every level of the organization.
I love that. 30 different roles. That's a lot of different kinds of talents you're looking for. I can't imagine what a caregiver of the year, but they should get lifted up high. Let me tell you, I can tell that.
Especially in such an underappreciated role and industry. I think that's really critical. And Kristin, you hit on a couple things that I would say are just really key for recognition, best practices, low barrier to participate. So anybody from any seat gets to be part of this experience. That peer-to-peer, or really just not a leadership decision of who is the caregiver of the year, but it's really individuals nominating and sharing other people, other individuals, and then really being values driven. So you talked about this community wins piece. I think that is part of one of your core values. So recognition really has to be built on that core values piece. I think it's really built in the everyday moments. And Kristin, you called that out really well.
I bet there's a lot of gratitude sharing. That's something we really practice a lot and try to bring there, to really call out, I'm really grateful that this happened. And I know when I'm in a community and my mom's, I share my gratitude a lot with everybody. I mean, I can't give it enough because I know how important those givers are, the aides that help and support her in so many different ways. So that gratitude practice, I'm sure, is alive in your facilities as well.
Yeah, I would say yes, it is. But I will say, I do think for a lot of the caregivers, it means more sometimes coming from somebody like you who's a family member, and sometimes it comes from us. But yes.
And I feel that, I'm glad you said that, Chris, because I feel that in my experience. And when I say it, they just light up. And I mean it. I mean, I'm not saying anything. It's not fake coming out of these lips. Let me tell you, I'm saying like, well, I know what you're up against. And thank goodness you're there and supporting, and all of your team at Capri. I can imagine I'd walk around and I probably couldn't share it enough with how they're impacting people's lives that way.
We have a lot of families who, unfortunately in our business, when people move out, a lot of times it's because they passed. They want to do something to recognize or show their thanks to the staff. And even simple things like stocking the staff room with a bunch of snacks that actually hits all 3 shifts. Or we've had some families who every shift bring in, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, those type of moments, I think, go a long way for a lot of our staff.
Well, I can tell you, I have a bowl of candy in my mom's room for caregivers whenever they want it. And my mom doesn't eat the candy, but I can tell you she loves to say, please take a piece, whatever that is. And it's a small moment, but I know the dish goes down. So I feel like, okay, a sweet every once in a while can be a good thing. But let's stay a little bit with that 30 roles. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's a lot of talent you're looking for in your space.
And those moments of gratitude and recognition are going to lead to retention. It's those repeated moments, right? So, Kristin and Gia, you're aware of statistics like this in your industry. I want to call one out that I thought was particularly interesting. It says in a 2022 survey of community-based residential facilities, the most common type of assisted living facility in Wisconsin, 1 in 3 reported turnover rates of 50% or more. 50% or more. Gia, I see you nodding your head. It's clear that leadership at Capri is really thinking about ways to keep people and engaged and happy, because it all ties back to that retention and that massive turnover rate.
And I feel that too. Just in my experience, I've only been in a senior living experience for now going on 2 years, but that turnover, I just want to grab people and say, please stay. I want you to stay longer. And I'm sure you feel that same thing.
And you mentioned some great examples when we first connected, like the 4-for-5 work week, the Capri U, which gives employees opportunities to grow and develop. So it sounds like there's a real commitment to investing in your team. Kristin, I want to start with you, and then Gia, add in your thoughts. What is the Capri philosophy on leadership development and learning opportunities? What will I experience as a Capri employee in terms of growth and development?
Well, I mean, I think we're extremely committed to it. As you mentioned in those statistics that you stated at 50%, I actually think that those are low. When you look at the caregiver level nationally, that percentage is over 100%. So, I think for us, we have to be creative, we have to be innovative, and we have to be willing to experiment. You mentioned the 4-for-5 program. Basically, that's a program where you work 4 days and get paid for 5. That has been very successful for us. When we talk about, leadership opportunities, we are a big believer in supporting people's education. So, we're going to offer ways for them to get tuition reimbursement, allow them a flexible schedule to attend classes or study for certain licenses and certifications. But we're very kind of focused on, once we have you within the Capri community, we want you to stay. And so we're going to work with you on career paths and, your supervisors to make sure that you're able to stay.
Gia, anything to add to that, to what Kristin's sharing?
Honestly, from an HR perspective, the part that we struggle with, and it's a good struggle, because we have so many communities and we have such great programs, we have to work really hard on making sure the employees know about the programs. So for us, it's not only having them, but during the weekly meetings, having the talk, hey, you guys, don't forget, we have these programs, we have these opportunities, because you guys know that too. You get into a business, you start doing your day-to-day work, and some of that stuff just isn't upfront for you. So we spend time, coming up with lunch and learns and programs for their weekly staff meetings on here's what's available to you. Here are the things that Capri offers as a company. And for us, that's been really important because you can have a million programs, but if nobody's using them, it doesn't help them stay. In an interesting turn of events with the 4 for 5, that I think when we started the program, we maybe didn't recognize how much personal ownership employees will have for their success of that 4 for 5 program on their own. They're finding their own replacements. They're switching shifts. And honestly, I'm not sure that was what we were thinking right away, but their ownership to that, and then other people are keeping them accountable, which makes them feel like they're part of the team and they're being successful together, which was kind of an area we weren't even really thinking about at the time. It was more about how do we draw people in with a great program, and then got all of these additional benefits that we weren't necessarily even thinking about until they happened, which has been great. Employees helping other employees because everybody wants to see the group benefit from such a great opportunity, which has been great, even better than we were hoping in that scenario. And then we as a company, and I know many do this, but the amount of feedback that we have gotten and helped with the retention is we have a program called Pay Active, which allows employees mid-pay period to go in and take out money that they've already earned before payday. It's been an amazing program. I think if you were to talk to our staff, they would say it's such a relief knowing I need to take out $150 on Friday to help cover a bill, but I'm not getting paid till next Friday. They can do that. And that has been an incredible retention tool for us as well.
That's a great example of just listening to the feedback from your employees.
Yeah. And just thinking creatively, I like, two things I want to call out on that, Gia, that you mentioned is that you were thinking creatively around, okay, we could offer this, whether it's 4 for 5, but then it's created a ripple of tying back into what you value around connection and owning and having a shared purpose at the same time. And I just want to call that out. It's not about the thing. It's about how that really then becomes a part of the culture, which I think is really cool. Although I'm not sure I want to be able to get my money ahead of time. That just scares me a little bit. I love for that entry need when you have those things. I think that's a fabulous opportunity. And then I want to go back. You said something that jumped out at me around organizations that have all these opportunities and things, but then they kind of just get lost because you've got work to do and things to do. And you mentioned it, you didn't use our phrase, but I just want to tie it back to one of our beliefs, because I think you're living it in a way, is that we have a framework and we say great cultures need to take a 365 approach, whether that's from learning, whether that's from values, whatever it may be. And you need to keep coming back in even small moments and say, we offer this, or here's this. You can't just let it sit there and get it from orientation. You have to constantly bring that back up. And it sounds like you're doing that, G, in a lot of different ways. And so I applaud that. I think that's a great thing. Strong cultures do that well. They keep bringing back and keeping alive their best practices, their learnings, their offerings, their benefits that way.
Gia, that one hits home for me too, as a communications professional and fanatic, I suppose. And one thing I would stress to you on that, Gia, is you can't communicate enough, right? I would love, please call me the day that you get feedback from somebody that's like, you're telling me too much about this program. I'm hearing too much about it. It sometimes feels as communications professionals like we're talking about this all the time, but look at the metrics, look at the data. You said you use some of that data to drive your decisions. So just look at participation and engagement in those programs that you're communicating. Use that to drive your frequency and channels. I really liked that. The other thing too that stuck out to me is just talking about this ownership and accountability as a result. And I think that trickles into just performance management in general. When we work with clients on performance management, we always say the employee owns their performance. And that's what I'm hearing you say about their growth and development. So I love that ownership and accountability has come out of this when it was really unexpected.
Well, I'd like to go back to moments. We're talking about small moments, Sarah. So I guess to sort of think about that, Gia and Kristin, are there any, recent small moments in your culture with your people that just jumped out at you saying, hey, this is us at our best, whether it was an interaction with residents, whether it's something you saw in your space, anything that jumps to mind as a moment of celebration, of learning that's happened recently in the community?
It's really the interactions that you're having with the residents and with their family members that comes from a hug that somebody gives you. Or I was just at a community last week and one of our residents just grabbed my hand. It was sort of her way of saying thank you.
I love it. Gia, anything comes to mind? Anything you would add?
Most recently, I was at a community helping with a program that we were working with, and a resident had caught me and was so proud of how cute their apartment was that they wanted me to come with them to the apartment because they were so proud and love where they live so much. They were like, I just have to show you how cute my apartment is and how excited and how lucky I am to be here. And I was like, absolutely. Just had nothing but great things. Also, I always enjoy when the residents tell me how great, even just the not regular day-to-day staff are, but the support staff that we have from the home office with Capri, and how much they enjoy seeing all of us in their communities, which stems from, and Kristin talks about this regularly, is that we are local and we can be anywhere within like an hour and a half if something needs to happen. And residents appreciate that, and staff does too. So, her being so excited about the apartment and just talking about how glad she was to see everybody was just kind of a nice thing to hear.
Yeah, and an example of the pride that the residents have where they live. We have our annual Enjoy Life symposium where we'll have over 1,200 seniors, anybody over 65 attending. And it's a really fun event with speakers and events. But we'll bring buses from our communities, and those residents will all likely have a t-shirt that says, enjoy life with a color. They'll all be in the same color, and then their community name on it. And they're just proud of where they live, which I think makes all of us proud of where we work.
You both are leading what I would call the good work and the necessary work for people at that stage of life. So I give you a lot of credit. It means a lot to me, people that are in that space and are doing good stuff. We really covered a lot of space. We talked about values. We talked about learning. We talked about retention and went a lot of different places. And I like to always highlight, a few things that jumped out at me. And you're creating a culture of enjoying life and trying to offer opportunities to sort of everybody find their happiness, whatever that may be, in a lot of different things. And it goes so far that it even leads to a symposium about enjoying life. It sounds like something I want to attend. So I just want to call that out. That sort of feeling, that kind of value, I think is really critical. And I see it being touched on a lot of different ways in your culture, and different ways that you're bringing that to life. So that's the first thing that jumps out at me. The second thing I want to call out is that you're trying some unique engagement, unique processes or practices to help with engagement and retention. But what I like is that you're tying them back again to the culture, and you're finding ways, and it may be by accident, but good accidents, that all of a sudden it's tying back to really being purposeful, and you're looking for people that the work they're doing aligns with their purpose, and you're creating ways for your team to connect really, really well. And I love that. And I think that that is critical. And then the third thing I want to go back to, and I may have four, Sarah, but the third thing I want to go to is this idea of to work in your culture and to add the best value, no matter your role. And you mentioned 30 different roles, and which is a lot of different things, is this idea of, in this day and age, about this pivoting, being able to pivot in the moment, and maybe that pivot is a question. Maybe that pivot is a pause. There's a lot of different ways that may come to play. But I think that's a strong word. And I think that word sometimes is used, thrown off, but I see it in action and how you can bring it to life and what you do. So that jumps out at me. And then I want to just end with, it sounds like in your culture, sometimes it just comes down to a hand or a hug. To me, I think that speaks a world of what you're trying to create there. And I, again, applaud you both. And I think that hand and hug should be taken into a lot of cultures and a lot of organizations that kind of miss that. Maybe it's a little more natural when it's such a people-focused organization and what you're doing. But I think that kind of empathy, understanding, touch is really important. That's what jumps out at me today. Thank you both so much for being here today and sharing a little bit about what Capri is doing. It's even brought a little tear to my eye, to be honest, because I'm living it. So when I hear two people speaking so well about it, it means the world. And I mean that wholeheartedly that way. So thank you both.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
We look forward to you joining in the conversation next time. Remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and learn more at humanworks8.com/podcast. And if you want to know what I'm wondering about each week, subscribe to my Wondering Wednesday newsletter on LinkedIn. Reach out to us if you need a partner to navigate your humanscape or a speaker from our team who will inspire your people and challenge your leadership. It all starts in one moment. Let's bring work to life and life to work together. You got us.